Ali, thank you so much for coming on the Your Next Level podcast. I'm so happy to chat to you today and for the audience to experience and get more information on how it is that they can accelerate their career growth. To start out, do you just want to share a bit about yourself and your journey on becoming an executive coach?
Yeah, first I just want to say thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. I'm really excited to be here and share with your audience. So I hope this will be a valuable conversation. So I'm Ali, I'm an executive coach and I specialize in coaching women in the workplace. The main topics we focus on is communication, executive presence, and building their leadership skills and capabilities. And just a bit about my background, I spent over a decade working in the HR space at category leading companies like Google, McKinsey, Dow Jones. And it was incredible to work in those types of high-performing, high-growth businesses. And what I really learned during my time there is the blueprint of what good leadership can look like and how to develop that. And I was doing lots of different things within my roles, but it was predominantly around building and leading teams and how to get performers that were maybe not great performers to become good performers and how to build up your leadership styles. And so that was me on a kind of a professional note. And so my human resource background really lent into the coaching aspect. And I was doing a lot of coaching throughout my time at those organizations. Then I think, much like other people, on a more personal note, the pandemic hit. I had a moment of reflection. I sat back and thought, what do I really love doing and where do I add the most value in terms of the role that I'm doing now? And it's always this space that when I'm working with clients, I think about, right, like where are we most passionate about? Where can we get paid? And where can we add value and add service to the world? And for me, coaching really encompassed all those three spaces. So I decided to get my first qualification that was in kind of talk traditional coaching. And then I realized through my time of working with the clients that they were really high performers and they needed support on a deeper level, which led me to getting a second qualification in physiology and neuroscience. And that was really awesome because it's really helped me understand how key chemicals and hormones affect the body, affect performance, affect how we show up and how we think about ourselves. So that's me in a nutshell.
So our background's quite similar, and I can understand why you went into the coaching space because it's just something that I'm passionate about as well. So thank you very much for sharing that. What are some of the challenges that you see people are having in their careers right now?
So I think, especially when I think about my pocket of coaching and women in the workplace that I am working with, there's a few challenges that I see. The first being lack of self-belief. The second being the challenge of work-life balance. And work-life balance to me comes in different shapes and forms. So by that, I mean the mum who's juggling her children with her work. I also mean the individual who feels really passionately about their job and therefore they're putting their kind of social life and life pieces to the side. And then I also mean the individual who is in a company where the culture is very work hard. And because of that, they're putting the needs or the pressures of the business ahead of their own personal needs. And I think the final thing that I really see is a dynamic between the need to improve communication skills balanced off with I think we're gaining more awareness around some historical fears or roles that women haven't traditionally been in the past. And I mean, decision-making roles in which women are now having to learn how to communicate like an executive, speak up more in ways that we haven't previously been exposed to or needed to in the past or had the opportunities to.
I completely agree. And even though I'm on the other side of the world than you, the challenges that I see are exactly the same. And I mean, the last point that you mentioned about women now, more women are in executive roles and having to speak up more. That it's really great that more women are in executive roles, but that is so true that communication, or we were empowered as, and now all of a sudden, like everyone needs to upskill. So for someone that's going through that challenge, what advice would you have for them?
So in terms of the challenge of improving your executive communication, and this is something that I focus on with a lot of my clients, I think that there's a few pieces to this. So there's pieces around mindset, lack of self-belief, fears, questioning self-worth. And that piece is an area that's like of great interest to me. And I believe that we need to be able to overcome fears and become confident in ourselves as kind of foundational building blocks before we have the ability to build the other strategic skills. And by that, I mean, how do I elevate my ability to give good presentations? How do I gain buy-in from people? Because a classic mistake that I see being made is that as females and as high performers, we want to skip to the bits that are strategic, that produce the actions, and which that's great. That's like perfect. That's totally okay. But without the piece of feeling kind of confident and secure in yourself and safe enough to speak up, you can get stuck into kind of this loop and this trap of knowing what to do, but not feeling confident to do it. And so having done a lot of research into space, someone that I really love is Dr. Russ Harris in this space. And he speaks about the confidence gap, which explains some of the underlying psychological reasons of why men traditionally outperform women in the workplace, despite women performing better academically. So there's this interesting dynamic here because women have great knowledge. We're normally real experts in our areas and our topics, but there's kind of a lack of ability to speak up for some reason. And how I think about this coaching is that, and an exercise that I would give to your listeners is that women can have a tendency to over-focus on our weaknesses as opposed to our strengths. And so really getting clarity on what your strengths are is a really good starting point. So whether that be writing them down or getting feedback from peers or doing a 360, I think some of the most transformative moments that some of my clients have had is when they've actually asked for feedback from other people and then have come back into coaching and said, I can't believe these are all the compliments or all the ways that other people see me that I don't see myself. And so I think that's great. And then that paves a path for changing limiting self-beliefs and being able to assume a more confident identity.
That is such good advice. I think everyone should do that exercise, like writing down your strengths. And if you feel courageous enough, asking other people as well, what do they think that your strengths are? I think that is such good advice. Great Resignation, every company was like just on a recruitment hunt. And now it's like so many companies are letting go of people. And then we were saying, you shared that, which I agree completely, that it's those companies that are just like recruited everyone they could possibly. And now they just like getting rid of those people as well.
Yeah. So I think that there's a dynamic with some organizations, and predominantly when I think about this, I'm thinking about the bigger organizations. My background being predominantly tech for the last 4 and a bit years means that they're the types of businesses that are top of mind for me. But I think that there's been a fair few organizations when we look at them who hired, and maybe the problem with tech is that there's so much, they need to build for hyperscale and be innovative, which means that from a business perspective, goals are constantly changing, products are potentially shifting, right? Although you might have the same areas, the products need to innovate and also sustain stability for the amount of users that are there. But that gives way to business needs changing quite rapidly, which can mean that projects become redundant quite quickly, which means that roles become redundant as part of that, unless the person has the skills to be able to place them in another area. I think once you grow to a certain size, if you hire lots of people who have similar skill sets and then a product area is shifted or no longer needed, then in theory that job is no longer needed. And Google, when we were there, was like very renowned for something that we would call pivoting. And we would pivot with business needs constantly all the time. And that didn't necessarily mean that our like KPIs or key performance indicators were changing, but it meant that the area of the business that we needed to support was changing, which I'm sure that you're familiar with in your job.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an adapt and overcome type mentality that you need. But I think within that, that's become incredibly hard, because this has been kind of a segue of businesses looking at, okay, based on how the world is shifting, and now the world is going to continue to shift with the introduction of AI and how that will continue to grow and expand. What do we really need to do as a business to keep ahead, to be present, to keep innovating, to be successful and hold our space? And businesses need capital, right? They need funding to keep going. And I think that some businesses have potentially used this as an opportunity to look at aligning the business goals with where they should be moving, with who they need. And then also potentially some businesses doing a bit of a performance audit in terms of, when I look at this department, where is this department too fat? Do we have a couple of layers of people doing the same job? And therefore, do I need that couple of layers, and should I be removing one?
And for someone that might, because what I've seen on LinkedIn, it's that it's not only certain roles or like only junior roles. It's so many different. It's HR and it's marketing and it's tech as well. So for someone that is going through that, what advice do you have for them? To what next steps can they take in order to make sure that they can still continue their career growth?
So I think if you are impacted by any form of redundancy, my first piece of advice is to go through the steps and stages of grieving as you would with any other loss. And I think that there can be a tendency, and I've seen this with some of my clients, to kind of suit up and have to feel like they're strong from the moment that they hear that they don't have that job. And that becomes quite detrimental, because some people, work is a large part of their identity. It's kind of one of the first questions that we ask people, right? Like, what do you do for work? And so we've become a culture that is very tied into our workplace identities. And so I think it's important to grieve that, going through the process of, this is not my schedule anymore. Like, I'm not part of this business anymore now. And like actually being able to feel the emotions of being sad, being frustrated, questioning like why it was you, but not in a place where you sit and you necessarily wallow in it, but just being able to process. And I think that becomes really healthy. I think the next thing to think about is, and I always think about this for myself, but you're never starting from zero. So if you're someone who's worked for 2 years, 4 years, 10 years plus, you have acquired knowledge in that time, and that knowledge can be transferred into a range of different jobs, a range of different industries. And I worked in so many different industries throughout my career, and I was always able to move and say, these are where the industries are similar, and able to highlight where the industries were different and where I would have to learn something in an interview. So I think remembering that you're not starting from zero, it's not building from the ground up. You are starting from knowledge. You're powerful and you have experience that you can move with you. And then also realizing that although there are companies who are firing, who were restructuring, and all of these pieces, in recessions or any time when some companies are down, there's always going to be some companies that are up. So there's always going to be a heap of companies who are really hiring, who are going after really great talent. And as long as you're willing to position yourself well and effectively and learn the skills to interview, polish up your CV, do the things that you know that you need to do to take, and the actions that you need to take, you should be able to position yourself successfully to find the next job. And I think those are the three pieces that I would really be thinking about if I was in that position.
And I think also getting help, like getting a coach to support you and guide you, especially if it's the first time that you're experiencing something like this. And because you can experience panic and not know what to do next. So I think getting that help, you don't have to do everything by yourself anymore.
Yeah. And I think that the amazing thing about the coaching space is that there's so many different coaches, so many different specialities, so much knowledge, people who are now in coaching that have a really strong recruitment background. And so there's lots of different ways to learn from people. And I think failing that, if you don't have the budget or if that just doesn't feel good for you, there's amazing resources on the internet. There's your podcasts, right, where people can learn from. And so there's other resources which you can definitely pull from in order to get the support or the motivation that you need and the clarity you need to be able to move forward.
Totally agree. And you touched on AI. So for those people that are not using AI for fun, like myself, not, that is maybe afraid that their jobs are going to become redundant because of technology coming in. What advice do you have for them to help them? Should we fear it or should we not?
It's a really good question. And I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. And the reason why I say that is because we're seeing the first iterations of all of these pieces. And the piece that we're seeing as the consumer is Bard, is ChatGPT. But we have huge companies that have been working with AI for very, very extensive periods of time, like DeepMind being one of them, internally, right, that are using AI to work on projects, or Watson that is working AI to help with cancer research. And so it's impossible to know how AI will grow and how it will change over time. And we only know the information that's in front of us. And if you're not in an AI company, it's really difficult to know. I think anyone who could tell you straight line, oh, AI is going to remove this job, and this need, and this need, and this need, is like, it's not fair to assume where it might go or what may become. But I think that the best thing that one can do is really understand the technology and the technology that we have access to, and in a really healthy growth type mindset. And I'll liken this to something that probably a lot of us can remember within the audience. But like, I remember as a child having the big boxy computer when computers were basically first invented, and it was on a dial-up. And when my mum called someone, the computer stopped working because it wasn't connected to the internet. I also have a dad who is an older generation who never really learned how to use a computer. Wow. So as he got older, it became extremely difficult for him to do his job because everything changed from being on his dictaphone with notes being written by hand and the help of secretaries around them to everything being digitalized. And with that comes the elimination of jobs. And so it's difficult to know what jobs will and won't be impacted and what order that may or may not look like. But I think the best thing you can do is start to understand the technology and also see it as a tool. So the thing that I always think about is AI is a tool right now that can increase productivity, can help us do things faster, can be a soundboard and double check for grammar mistakes and issues like this, right? It's no different to any other tool like a Slack or a Gmail. It's just a case of learning it and evolving with it as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what is your favorite AI tool that you are exploring right now?
Maybe is because I'm ex-Google, but I really like Bard a lot. And that's the one that probably, if I'm like tinkering with anything, that's probably what I'm on. And the one that's caught my attention recently, I'm blanking on the name, but I think it's Microsoft Creatives, something along those lines. And it creates loads of beautiful graphics, which is an area of weakness of mine. And I think as a business owner, it becomes difficult because you have to be in all different places of your business, right? You have to be like a marketeer, a salesperson, great at your job, create products, and really to have one human that has all those skills. I'm sure that there are people that do, not me. And so to have something like an AI tool in which you can say, okay, I need something that looks like this, has these people in the photo and speaks to this objective is extremely, extremely helpful.
And I think that's just, you just gave us a clear indication of how you can actually use AI to benefit yourself in your daily life.
Yeah. And I think that it's maybe a slightly different perspective as a business owner. But I think even within companies, the value of AI is going to be being able to source data to really understand your clients more so that you can build better products, so that you can service the market better. And I see that AI, maybe for smaller businesses will be even more powerful, because it's going to create a space in which we can do kind of supercharged searches on data, on what the marketplace really needs, so that you have really great product market fit. You've got all the information that you need, good reporting, and bits that businesses typically lack that will help them move faster.
That is so true. I agree. And can we just shift to talking about one of the challenges that you mentioned earlier about people working so hard, giving their all, and on the weekends they might be depleted. And in that way, I think that even people that love their job, that enjoy what they do, but once you are giving so much of yourself, you end up burnt out and you end up like maybe hating your job. We talk about how one can actually hate that. If balance is the right word to use. I know some people are saying, there's no such thing as balance. And then other people are saying, you should have balance. So how can one navigate that if you are going through that right now?
So first, I want to say that I resonate with that individual and kind of the archetype of that person. And I think that there's many nuances here that are incredibly hard, because it's figuring out whether it's an internal pressure from yourself. And if it's an internal pressure from yourself, where is that drive coming from? Is that drive coming from a place of, I really love my work, and actually by doing more of my work, I get energy back, and therefore that's unlikely to cause like a burnout or adrenal fatigue? And speaking from someone who has had adrenal fatigue, I really understand this dynamic a lot. But I think when you really love your job, it looks a bit different. And I don't think that you build to the level of burnout. The people that I see who are more likely to burn out are those who, yes, they love their work, but they're more likely to be running at a goal. And what I mean by this is there's kind of, I'll use a fitness example. It's, let's say you're about to get married and your wedding is coming up in 6 weeks, or you're about to go on holiday with your best friends and you want to look amazing in your bikini, right? And we've all had that goal before. And so for 6 weeks, you're like, I'm going to sprint hard at working out. I'm going to do HIIT workouts 4 times a week. I'm going to walk over 10,000 steps. I'm going to plug all my calories into my fitness pal. And I'm going to watch the pounds drop off me. And every morning I'm getting on the scales, and that number better go down so that I know that I'm looking beautiful in that bikini shot that's going on Instagram. Like, that mentality is great and it serves a purpose and it can work, right? But by the time you get to the 6 weeks and you're on holiday, you're like there stuffing your face with the bread on the table that's free before your dinner comes, because it's so exhausting the way that you've approached that. Your body is exhausted and your mind is exhausted because you've created this kind of box for yourself. And a really harsh and strict way of showing up and being and having to live. And so relating this back to the workplace, I think where I see people burn themselves out is when they're doing all this extra time and there's extra hours, because there's either an internal drive to get a promotion as a need to prove that they are successful, capable, smart, able to succeed in the workplace, or potentially an external drive. So like a desire to prove to parents, friends that they've been successful in what they're doing. And so it's that kind of core intrinsic belief and motivator that is then producing behaviors that are ineffective and don't serve the person. And I think that's when you end up getting the effect of Friday night, you are supposed to be going out with your friends and having fun, but instead you can't do it. You have to turn Netflix on and order the pizza in because you're too exhausted.
Yeah.
And that's because of the kind of dynamic between this mindset and then ineffective behaviors. And so that's how I kind of segment and think about that area.
And for someone that is experiencing that, what are some of your suggestions on what it is that they can do to firstly like recognize that this is, I'm actually experiencing, burnout right now?
Yeah. So if I speak from experience from when I kind of ran myself into this state or adrenal fatigue or being really, really exhausted, I think firstly, you need to look at what's happening in your external environment. And what I mean by this is, where are you adding stress stimulus to your life? So if you're someone who is a high performer, who's classically like running in these sprints to achieve something, the trends that I see is that you're likely someone who loves to do HIIT exercise and is fueling yourself off coffee. And so there's this dynamic between hormonally and body-wise driving yourself into a state of adrenal fatigue, because coffee is a stimulator. Like, it's better to be able to get rid of the caffeine, even if it's to drink tea or swap it for a matcha, be able to drink water, like switch it out and get rid of it. And that was something that was pivotal for me. And swapping out exercises that are really intense, like HIIT, for something that is like low impact, but still helps you with your weight goals or whatever goals you have around health, whether that be Pilates, whether that be a swimming, something that helps the body to reduce the cortisol levels. So I think that's one, right? It's like stress management is really key here. And then I think the second piece is really looking at your mindset. So I'm trying to unpack and understand, where is this internal drive coming from, and how can you start to kind of move away from this mindset that's not particularly healthy and not serving you, to a healthier mindset. And one of the exercises that I would really recommend here, and I really like as an exercise, is just writing down all of your beliefs. And we all have them. Like, there's some that are common, right? Like, I'm not attractive enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not capable enough. And then going through and trying to find evidence for them. So like evidence for why they exist, evidence for why they don't exist, and being really honest with yourselves, like holding a mirror, all of the times that you did, all of the times that they haven't shown up. And then thinking action-wise, what can I do to start to reverse these, or how can I help myself work through them? And I think that once we have awareness of, okay, I'm working extra hard today because I sent an email which I feel like the email made me look silly, or I showed up in a bad way, and now I'm kind of punishing myself with longer hours to make up for the mistake, or I'm working longer because if I don't, my male peers are here and I'm scared that I'm going to be compared to them. Then I think we gain awareness. And once we start to gain awareness, you can start changing the behaviors that follow those patterns.
That is, I really love like all of those tips. And I think especially the last one, to really understand like, where is it coming from? I think that is really important, and writing down those beliefs and looking like for evidence, exactly like you said. I think that is such a great tip. And do you have you had any clients that have experienced this as well?
Yes, often. And I think with being in high performing companies can create a dynamic of especially sprinting between, I call it sprinting between promotions. So being in kind of one level of an organization and really wanting to be at the next level of the organization. And that creates a mentality of, I have to work super, super hard, and just, I'm going to throw everything into it to be able to get to that level. And what happens on the other side of that is total like burnout and fatigue, because you have to sustain, in most organizations, sustain running at something for about 12 months until you get the promotion. And for some organizations, it can be longer, which is a very, very long period of time to put yourself under your mind and your body essentially under like this high stress pressured situation.
And I think especially as females as well, like I know with myself, I automatically think, oh, I have to work even more harder because I'm a female, because I need to like show, myself more and change. I feel like I'm responsible for changing people's perceptions about things, which I'm really not responsible for either. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that when I first started coaching, I was coaching both male and female. And then when I made the pivot into solely females, I did a lot of research around this, right? In terms of what are just kind of pop culture things that people are saying versus what does the research show. And there's a clear double bind effect, I want to say, in the research, which really speaks about females and this feeling of needing to kind of double prove ourselves. And where I find it really sad and really upsetting is that I see loads of females with amazing expertise, amazing knowledge, amazing experience. And typically some of them are asking the same question, which is, how do I gain more knowledge and experience and expertise in my area? Which is the wrong question to be asking, because the right question to be asking is, how do I leverage the knowledge, expertise, and skills that I now have to enable my career to continue to grow? Because as you grow up in an organization, it's not about your expertise as much as it is about other skills that then come to play, as it is about your executive communication, your presence, your ability to build strategy. And so it's about building some of those softer skills as you grow, rather than compounding on your expertise, which you probably already have in heaps and stacks and waves.
That is very helpful. That is very helpful. And we also earlier spoke a bit about strategy. So for someone that is, either just started in an executive role or is wanting to grow their career into an executive role, earlier when we spoke about strategy, it was around people really being more strategic about their careers now, rather than previously just working hard and waiting until you are promoted. What are some of like the thought processes that people need to start thinking about or rather start shifting in, in terms of like setting a strategy for your career?
So I think the first thing that's like pivotal and most important is having really strong clarity in terms of, where do you want to go? Who do you want to be? What does that look like? And how do you show up? Which sounds like a lot of the work that you do with your clients is really developing that North Star and the career clarity. And then I think that there's other pieces, if we specifically think about females, which help with career progression. And so I think the first bit is adopting a growth mindset all the time.
Okay. So yeah, if we can just continue with your tips and strategies for someone that's wanting to go from, a intermediate level manager to an executive role.
Sure. So I think that it's really important to have a vision as well. So following on from the clarity piece. And by vision, I mean a big vision around what you want the executive role to look like for you. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why is it meaningful for you? Why does it matter? Who are you helping? Who are you improving the lives of? Are some questions that you can start asking yourself. And I think what's important to remember here is that every single job has stakeholders and end users, and there's people who always love and depend on the product or the service that's being provided and are probably connected to the business mission. So kind of each business has people that feel connected to it, that are users of the product. And I think as a female leader, when you're moving into being, say, head of into executive, one of the pressures that you can feel is like, am I going to be good enough in this job? And so really moving into a mindset of this really strong vision, and the vision that trumps all of your fears, all of your concerns and worries. Like I think regularly waking up and reminding yourself, I'm doing this because it's of service and help to other people, can be a really powerful way to engage in taking the right actions and the right behaviors to enable you to step up into that executive role, because now you're moving from a place of feeling expansive, feeling excited, feeling like, what can I add to the world and how can I help people, which is really motivating, versus when we sit in fear, we can kind of stew, overanalyze, overthink things, which tend to block. And then I think the other thing about stepping in from, say, a head of or senior role into an executive role is really understanding that there are differences between those roles, and you will be expected to do different things. So whether that be presenting, whether that be presenting in company town halls, whether that be speaking to stakeholders and investors in the business, or if you're a smaller company, venture capital firms. And that's a different style and way of communicating. So understanding then, how can I start to build the skills that will enable me to be successful, and starting to build those ahead of time, so that when you are moving into the role, you feel confident. A lot of skills that you can pre-build it, knowing that you can grow and evolve as you do it. So I think it's really important that, and there's an interesting dynamic here, we can, as females, as women, we give ourselves a lot of slack sometimes when it's around learning a new skill. So for example, if all of a sudden you decide that you want to learn how to cook and like bake bread, you give yourself slack to mess up like the first few loaves, and then you hope that you get into a rhythm with, how do I bake the bread? Or if you want to learn how to dance, like, you know, it's step by step that you have to take until you understand the whole dance, and you're slower with the choreography. And I think in the same grace and patience that you would give yourself in those fields, the same needs to be applied to careers, knowing that these skills are built over time and they compound over time as well. And some things you just can't know ahead of time, and it will take you a few moments of failure or things going wrong, or just general learnings or learning from other people, that then it will be like an aha moment where things will click together. But that is a case of kind of time and patience and time in role.
That is brilliant. I remember when I stepped into my executive role, and the first time I had this executive meeting, in my mind, I didn't show up as I expected myself to show up. And afterwards, I was so hard on myself. And thank goodness I had a coach at that time. And the coach, all he said was, it was your first time. And I was like, yeah, it was. Like, how can you expect yourself to be, excellent when it's just your first time? So I think it's very important. The point that you made is so important. So for someone that wants the support from a coach, can you share with us what the benefits of having a coach in your life is? And then also the way you do coaching, is it, a 8-week period, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think the effectiveness of having a coach really varies, right, depending on what type of coach you're looking for, what areas they specialize down in. So just talking broadly and widely about coaching, I believe it's the job of the coach to hold a lantern and illuminate paths, and multiple paths, in front of the client, that then you ask through a series of questions and guidance to help the client decide what the most effective path is for them, based on their experience, their backgrounds, and their needs, to reach their goals. And I think that that's really key and important, because you are the captain of your own ship. You understand, as the client, your background, your fears, all of the internal thoughts that, although someone can ask you the right questions, they don't know you as intimately as you know yourself and your background, right? So it's about empowering the client to be successful. And then I think generally, with coaching and the effectiveness of it. I think the best thing about coaching is it's the ability to give feedback, illuminate kind of blind spots or areas that someone has to work on, and asking the right questions that allow the clients to figure things out for themselves and then giving that toolkit back. So it's really a case of raising as much self-awareness as possible. And that self-awareness then creates the ability to start to notice patterns, behaviors that may be serving and may be helpful, or then patterns and behaviors that aren't serving, and figuring out, do I need to do something about this or not? And I think I was talking to my supervisor earlier, and we were talking about how you can have some behavioral things which maybe you just need awareness on them. And actually you can then choose to say, you know what, this is part of my personality and I'm okay with it. One being for me, which I'm open about, I often when I'm thinking, I will like look to one side or another side. And that's just like a habit and a pattern that I have. And so at that point, I can choose to say, okay, I have awareness over this. Do I want to change it? Is it harming someone? Is it not? Maybe I want to change it in meetings, but maybe it's okay for other situations. Or I take more accountability and ownership and say to people, oh, before we start speaking, this is a behavior that I display. It just means that I'm thinking. It doesn't mean that I'm disengaged or disarming what the other person may be thinking or may be concerned about. And I think that's a great thing about coaching. It's really that raising of self-awareness that allows the person to take more action, accountability, ownership, to be able to self-improve and move forward in the way that they want to in their lives.
I love that. And working through like your limiting beliefs and your fears and having that dedicated person there, I just think that there's nothing better than having someone that you know is going to support you, whether it is in your career. Because I think often we seek career advice from like our partners or our family members that may not have had the success or, is knowledgeable on the topic in the way that you want to grow. So I think it's much, much better and advisable for, if you can, to get professional assistance with it. Do you have any like up and coming programs or webinars, or how can someone work with you?
I do. And I just want to respond to your piece on the partners and parents piece, because family is great. Family is hugely important. The amazing thing about family is how supportive family is, regardless of the amounts of mistakes or mess ups you make. Like most families always there. It's very unconditional, which is a really beautiful thing. And the second piece of family relationships or romantic relationships and friendships is that predominantly that person is geared to, or those people are geared to want to support and protect you, which is wonderful and is perfect. But sometimes, and I think in coaching, this is something that is very true, is that there has to be a balance between support and also directness and firmness in a situation. Because to be able to grow, and if you're not reaching a certain level or you want to, there are areas which you will need to inevitably improve on or learn about yourself. And therefore you need someone who is going to be a genuine mirror and say when you're displaying behaviors that aren't going to benefit you or aren't going to help you move towards your goal. And families or friends can often jump into this protector, loving mode where they want to wrap you up in a bubble and tell you that you were right and everything that you did in that situation was correct. And so I think that that's beautiful. That dynamic is beautiful. There's also a space to understand objectively what was happening in the situation and the truth so that you can learn from it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Support the family, but you need to get that professional assistance. Unless there's someone in your family that has it, then okay.
Yes, totally. So to answer your question about working with me, I have one-on-one slots to work with me. Typically, I work on like 3 months, 6 months, 9 month packages with people. They're totally flexible. as I said earlier, the type of person I work with is kind of a professional female in the workplace. Usually there's someone who is at least 10 years plus into their career, and the focus areas are usually around confidence, communication, clarity, and kind of continuing to want to lean into self-mastery. And then I have a very exciting new program, which is launching in September, and I've started to take applications for it. I am honestly so excited for this program. Probably sound like a massive geek now, but that's okay. And the program is called Voice, and it is kind of what it says on the tin. So it's for professional females in the workplace who want to communicate with more confidence, conviction, and clarity. And this is going to be a 6-week program. There are 6 pre-recorded modules, and there are going to be 5 live modules. And we're going into kind of a series of different topics, from fear to how to deal with difficult conversations to being more strategic in terms of getting buy-in. So those are the bits that are coming up and the ways to work with me.
That program sounds very exciting. I might just join. It definitely sounds like something that every person in a leading role should be joining, or if you are wanting to get into a leading role, it sounds very valuable. So where can people find you and connect with you?
So I am mostly on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is just Alexandra Levy, or you can find some more information on me, which is www.cognoscoaching.com, and I will send you the link, so hopefully we can kind of add it to the show notes.
Of course, yeah, I'll definitely link it in the show notes. Thank you so much. I think this was so valuable. I took so much tips out of this, and I think so many people are going to as well. Thank you for your time, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, and I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
You're very welcome.